Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly Q&A&T videos. This is season 4, episode 12. Our first question of the week.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry. This is going to be a little exciting. This is our first use of the Tantu Totem on our regular Flashpoint team. You're going to see it in action. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt
problem. Our first question of the week comes from Krishna, Theja, and they say, any ideas how to deal with Astro Harness? It breaks all my damage dealers, especially their strong special 2.
All right, so we'll get into, maybe I'll start with the specifics and get into the general strategy later. But to the team that we're playing, so right now we're back to having our Flashpoint Aquaman be like a straight tank because he has the Astro Harness. He's the one we bring in to face the Astro Harness if the opponent has it in first slot. Because of his bleed on special 1, Aquaman's, our goal is to take the opponent with Astro Harness down to past 50% to at least trigger his second invulnerability. And you might notice that we don't bother checking anyone else's gear most of the time, only whoever's in first slot. Because if anyone else has the Astro Harness, we're bringing in our specialist, Flashpoint Deathstroke, who does a bunch of splash damage on special 1. So what I'm hoping to do is, if anyone else on the team has Astro Harness, when they tag in, they've already lost a good chunk of health and have triggered their 50% invulnerability already while they were off screen. Which also works nicely if Astro Harness was the opponent's first slot, because once they tag out, I'm tagging in Deathstroke to get more splash damage in. Right? So it still works. Basically, I'm looking at other people on the team as vulnerabilities. So in the general sense, the approaches that we use when facing Astro Harness are, 1, we can maximize splash damage when one of the other teammates is in. 2, we have high damage single hit specials. So there's a chance of bypassing either the 50% or 10% invulnerability, or maybe both, with a really big one hit KO after the first invulnerability passes. That's 2. 3, use our tank to wait out the invulnerabilities, right? But your tank needs to have at least some offensive potential, otherwise you're just giving your opponent more time to generate power and wail on you.
Yeah.
And actually, number 4, sort of a subset of strategies, if I'm going to get hit anyways, right? If I can't do anything and I'm waiting for stuff to happen, I might make a calculated decision to just swing away instead of blocking.
Yeah.
Because if they're not geared for damage, I'm willing to eat some of that as a trade-off for generating more power so that I'm ready to hit them hard when the invulnerability wears off. Or even my swings, even if it doesn't hit them, you can see sometimes that it's still generating power anyway. So what I'm doing is trading off a little bit of damage for power.
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess the last thing, which we showed in the most recent Tantu Totem video with Dawn of Justice Batman and Claw of Horus, we can try to shatter it.
Yeah, it's not as reliable for sure.
Right, but
harder to do.
It sure is fun, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because Claw of Horus, you can still bust gear even if the special 1 doesn't hit. So it's not a Dawn of Justice Superman thing. It's a Claw of Horus thing. So you do a couple. If he doesn't tag out, then the Astro Harness invulnerability doesn't engage while they're still in if you happen to have broken it.
Yeah.
And I guess if we think of in broader terms of strategy, the biggest threat when you're fighting against Astro Harness is those 3 periods where they're invulnerable. So it's a matter of making it through 3 periods of time where the other guy gets free shots at you, or maybe trying to bypass some of them, right? So either survive it or to skip them. And that skipping means you just jump past the point into the next invulnerability by doing enough damage, right? And I guess related to, I mean, we mentioned it, Tantu Totem, right? I think we're probably going to be getting more questions about how to deal with Tantu Totem.
For sure. And I think Tantu Totem is a great way of actually dealing with Astro Harness, of just using specials over and over again to waste time.
There you go.
For free.
Yep.
It's the same kind of thing that we did with the Shattering Gear, but Shattering Gear has the added benefit of it maybe not coming up again.
Right.
Even just getting your power back with the Tantu Totem is enough to waste time where they definitely can't do any damage to you, and it definitely doesn't cost you anything.
That's true. So that's sort of like a subset of the whole using your tank, but not using your tank. But
you could use anybody who has a Tantu Totem. Yeah,
killing time while they're invulnerable by just running a special, and it doesn't cost you anything because your power's still back. Right.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Phoenix23, and I guess this is a little bit more of a comment. There's kind of a question embedded in it. They say, I really enjoyed the aesthetic of Altered Carbon, and Joel Kinnaman is a great actor. I really love the Marvel movie franchise, especially with all the tie-ins between them all. Thor Ragnarok is really funny, but I really recommend Civil War if you guys haven't seen it. Wonder Woman is also a good choice, especially since Zack Snyder ruined Batman vs. Superman, and a breath of fresh air. I'm interested to know what kinds of shows you guys like, possibly Netflix shows or films in general. I'm a movie fanatic myself, so I always love discussing movies and shows.
Oh, okay, so I love this question because it gives me a chance to wax a little bit about the stuff that I like. But all right, so maybe I should address Altered Carbon first, right? Because I like the way it started. I also liked the aesthetic. I like that. That's a good word. But one of the things I found really disappointing, and you might want to cover your ears if you don't want to have it spoiled a little bit, is that it fell into that cliche in the last maybe episode or two where the characters do a ton of dialogue during major fight scenes, and they started really behaving in ways that were inconsistent with what they'd been doing before. And so it took me out of it, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt just, it didn't land. The show did, the final couple episodes didn't land exactly where I thought. And I get that they made a bunch of changes from the books. I don't expect it to be exactly like the books. I think some of the really fundamental stuff was there, and that when I say that, I mean like the idea of the envoys, even though they were rebels instead of being the I guess the establishment. Yeah. I was okay with that. It's that right at the end where it got really cliche. Oh, but all right. So speaking of the actors in Altered Carbon, James Purefoy, who played the I can't even remember his name, the rich guy that they're working for. He's also in another show that happens to be on Netflix called Hap and Leonard, and it is funny and dark, and it was based on a series of books by Joe Lansdale. Totally love the guy. Joe Lansdale is great. The books are great. It was, I believe, Savage Season for the first one that followed the story of Savage Season, and the second season followed the story of Mucho Mojo. Highly recommended. A lot of fun, and it delivers. Like I don't know how else to say it. Joe Lansdale's got this funny way. It's a lot of action. It's a little noir. It's a little bit funny. It's a little bit like that a lot. What have you watched lately?
We're watching something together that's really good. Bob's Burgers.
Oh, yeah. I wish it hadn't taken me so long to find it.
Yeah, I've been interested in watching it for a couple of years, but there was not a great way of watching it online, and it recently came to Netflix.
Yes.
I had like a passing interest in it. I knew that it was supposed to be good, but also had enough stuff to do that it wasn't worth me searching out a way to watch it. But it's on Netflix. 7 out of the 8 seasons. The 8th season is either just finished or finishing up or something like that. And it's really, really good. It's consistently funny.
Oh.
It's done 7 full seasons on Netflix, and all of the seasons are just as good. If anything, they almost get better. They almost find their kind of groove even better after the first season or two.
Yeah. Oh, I'm loving Bob's Burgers.
So that's really good. And something else that has Kristen Shaw in it, who's one of the voice actors in Bob's Burgers, is the other thing that I'm watching right now.
She's Louise.
Yeah, she's Louise. Is Last Man on Earth.
Okay.
And that's also a really kind of solid show. They're both comedies. Last Man on Earth is a little bit closer
live
to
action.
a drama. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's live action, but those are some really solid shows that I'm watching on Netflix right now.
Right. Oh, and actually for Phoenix 23, if you're a movie fanatic, I strongly recommend a YouTube channel called Filmjoy that does a show called Movies with Mikey, and he always has something interesting to say about movies, and if he reviews a movie that I like, I always come away with a deeper appreciation of the movie.
Yeah, and he only reviews movies that he personally really likes or thinks he has something really interesting to say about.
Yes.
So all of the videos tend to be also good recommendations if you haven't seen it.
Right.
So you can look at movies you've already seen and see what he has to say about them, or you can look at movies that he's done videos on and then go and watch them and then come back afterwards.
So that reminds me too. One thing I really miss is Roger Ebert. He's been gone for a few years now, but I used to go. His video reviews were always like the go-to kind of thing for me, because even I didn't always like the same movies that he did, but I always knew after reading one of his reviews whether that was the kind of movie that I'd really, really like, or maybe something that I would give a pass on, whatever his opinion of the movie was.
Yeah. And I mean, one last thing, I guess. If you like movies and superhero movies, I assume you will have had to have seen the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. But a quick recommendation is anything else from the guy, basically.
Oh!
Memento,
The Prestige! Alright, so The Prestige, I think, doesn't get nearly as much recognition as it does, because Memento and Inception and Batman, they're all sort of high-profile movies, right?
Yeah, I think The Prestige is kind of higher budget, higher production value. in the same vein as Inception when compared to like Memento,
Yep.
but is a similar kind of thinky and cool that Memento is. Maybe not on the exact same level, but like cooler than Inception in my opinion even.
Right. I think a lot of the movies of his that I like have that moment later on where you think, oh crap, that's what was happening.
And you can totally rewatch the movies almost instantly and after having finished them and realize how well it's been set up.
And just come at it, because then you really get a sense of how it is when you come to some piece of art or media. A lot of your appreciation has to do with what you bring to it. There's nothing inherent in it that means that you have to see it one way or another, but when you come back to it with a deeper understanding, like this is, alright, so I've mentioned this before, Hyperion, and the Fall of Hyperion does that like beautifully, where you read the story, you think, okay, this is space opera, it's kind of cool, and then you read Hyperion, and you think, whoa.
Yeah, you mean Fall of Hyperion?
And
then there's like Endymion and Rise of Endymion, and it's a good series all the way through.
Yes, but that was like Hyperion stood on its own when there was no Fall of Hyperion, but having come back to it after that, it's really like it rewards rereading.
Yeah. So there we go. I guess there's so much to talk about for movies.
But there's one thing I want to point out too. So I don't always remember a lot about the plot of a movie, but I tend to remember more about how I feel when I watch it. So there's a really cool idea that Joe Walton came up with. She's a writer about the suck fairy, where sometimes when there's something that you really love and you come back and watch it, it's like you don't like it as much, and it's the idea that the suck fairy came and it made it all sucky.
Yeah, because you were like a kid or something when you first read it, so... Or the part that you remember the most vividly about it, you thought was like the whole book was like a chapter of it.
And it wasn't even in there. It was something that you thought was so cool that wasn't even in the book. And
you just made it up. Yeah, you had thought about it enough that it kind of appeared as part of the memory.
Yep. Oh, I know you said last thing, and I don't want to just keep on going on this. We can question.
Talk a little bit more about movies.
Recent movie that I loved was Sing Street.
Yeah, that was really good.
There's I can't remember what the director's name was. Carney? Is it something Carney, maybe?
I don't know.
We'll figure it out and put it in the description, but he's done 3 musical movies that have a funny way. They're not like the traditional kind of musicals, but music plays a huge part in each movie. He hit it out of the park, I think, with Sing Street. He did it also with once, and the weakest of the 3 is probably Begin Again. But all 3 I can strongly recommend. And there's just something about them, and I don't, because I'm not a movie critic, I don't really know how to describe it in a way that really gets a sense of why they're good. But they have this great way of making the music not seem like something stuck in.
Well, because they're musicals, but the characters are the ones that are making and playing the music.
Yep.
And the process of creating it, or the reason why the music is there, is a big part of the story. Right. So it's stories about musicians, and that's why it's a musical. It's not like stories about normal people where they all happen to all know the same words.
And they jump into song. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So sometimes there will be a song about an event, but that's because one of the characters, witnessed the event and then got inspiration for a song from it. And that's the only time there's like kind of referential music, and there's music that stands just by itself too, a little bit almost separate from plot, but also kind of thematically appropriate. So there we go.
I think we're getting through the fights too quickly. We got a nice big question at the end, and
so this question comes from, or it's not exactly a question, but this comment comes from Drake Pendragon, and they say, generally love you guys, but when you use SJW speak like place of privilege when talking about being guys, it disappoints me. But I like to believe I know where you're coming from, and it isn't intended in such a place as to disrespect people who are a different political ideology, such as using the word homophobia, when the more accurate garbage would be somebody who disapproves of homosexuality or same-gender marriage, because not everybody who thinks that way has a fear of homosexuals. Other than that, great work. Love the rest of the Q&A&T. And I think he later corrected it where garbage wasn't...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was something just, like term...
Or something,
There was an autocorrect there, so he didn't mean garbage. It wasn't as, like, angry at the term.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening to this now... We actually did end up exchanging a few emails with Drake, but
just talking about it.
Yeah, but I still want to talk about this a little, right? So maybe I need to unpack it a bit, right? So SJW is a sort of a common usage short form for social justice warrior.
Yeah.
And the first part I have an issue with is, how did that ever become an insult? I know it is, right? But how is it a bad thing to be on the side of social justice, right? then individual gets a fair shake from society. It seems like it's something that we should all be able to get behind, right?
And I think it's important to note that, like, the way that the word is used now, it's common enough, and I think in some contexts useful enough that it's hard to fault any one person for using it now.
Well, okay, so, and I get that point because it's a shorthand, it's an abbreviation for something that you want to get across.
Yeah.
But my issue with the word is that it was originally coined as an insult, right? It meant in a sort of derisive, ironic kind of way to say, "Oh, you're a social justice warrior." Like you're not. Like you think you're doing something useful and you're fighting for it. Well, you're not, either in a way that they're not really fighting for or not doing very much.
Yeah.
Or that somehow these ideals that you have aren't meaningful enough and you call it social justice because you want to mock it.
Yeah, it's basically a derisive way of calling somebody like an activist, like a rights activist.
Right. So my issue with the term is that when you it started off as an insult, but when you let it become common usage and adopt it for yourself, you're sort of making it hard to have. It's a bad starting point for a good faith conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I'm a conservative and I call a liberal a libtard, or if I'm a liberal and I call a conservative a cuckservative, right?
There's so many just gross but a little clever insults that people have come up with.
But so what it gets to is that if you start with that, then you know that there's a really low chance, or you're setting yourself up to have a really low chance to have any kind of meaningful conversation, right?
One of my favorite really crappy insults like that is the term soy boy, which is actually meant to indicate somebody being effeminate because they have soy
phytoestrogens,
which is total crap. But
because it doesn't work like that.
Yep, absolutely does not work like that. But it's such a weird insult to even start with.
Yeah.
It's awful, and it sucks to see them used, but it's almost funny to watch people use them.
Yes.
Like, because I don't know how you can say soy boy like it's an insult and then not laugh at yourself a little bit afterwards. Because if I was using a term, like, it just sounds silly.
Okay. Maybe getting back to the original idea though, to me, this really has nothing to do with politics, right? And that's why to me it feels like, I mean, we're not American, but it's one of the reasons why American politics, it seems like it's so toxic right now, because it should never be an issue of political party affiliation, whether you think people deserve to be treated fairly and have the same opportunity for success.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll do it like with one of those analogies that's going to totally fail, but there are a lot of things that I don't approve of, right? I hate Vegemite. Oh my god. It tastes disgusting. But when I tried it first time, it made me totally want to cack. Yeah. And I'm never going to voluntarily eat it again, but I realize that there are people who like Vegemite, so the grocery store nearby will sell it to them. They get to buy it and eat it, and as long as no one's forcing me to eat it, I'm okay with that. Even if there's a small bit of shelf space taken up that might have had something else instead that I might have wanted, opportunity cost and all that, I'm okay with that. Now, if people were smearing it all over my food, I would totally get behind a ban on Vegemite. And if you want to call me a vegaphobe, or should I say Vegemite phobe?
Yeah, because vegaphobe just sounds like you don't like vegetables.
Yeah, because I like vegetables. I'm all for vegetables, with some of them. All right, so here's the thing. I get that people disapprove of homosexuality, but no one is forcing anyone else to participate.
Yeah, in fact, I'm sure people who are disapproving of homosexuality are expressly not welcome to participate.
I guess I just don't see how it's any of my business. And if people want same-sex marriage, as long as no one is forcing a church or a religion to officiate the marriages, who cares? If the government wants to recognize same-sex marriages so that people get the protections that come with marriage, I'm thinking, why not? Right? So I've heard that slippery slope argument where people say something like, if they allow same-sex marriage, they'll allow marriage between people and goats, right? So where does it end? And here's the thing. I'm guessing that the people who disapprove of and hate and are fighting against same-sex marriage would disapprove and fight against letting people marry goats. And you know who else would be helping them fight against marriage to goats? Pretty much everyone who's okay with same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
So there is no slippery slope because there's no one else that's going to be pushing for that, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that there are people actively persecuting people who are gay or trying to ban same-sex marriage, that's more than just disapproval, right? They're trying to interfere with other people's freedoms. So maybe the fear in phobia isn't quite accurate, but it seems like, to me at least, it comes closer than just calling it disapproval, right? So maybe it's a language issue here. And I love language, right? So maybe the better term is, if you're going to use the root of terms like racist and sexist, you could call them sexualists, but that gives the wrong connotation, right?
Yeah.
Or, so if you want to go with the root word like misogynist or misandrist, which is the term that the men's rights activists use, right?
Yeah.
Saying hatred of men or by it being against men, you call them mis-homosexualists, which has a whole different connotation too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Language is funny, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard some people trying to justify their disapproval by saying that they don't want to influence impressionable children, in which case, to me, yeah, that actually is fear.
Yeah.
And then in those cases, using the term homophobia is justified.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In our email exchanges with Drake, he did actually have an issue with the term homophobia because there's an association with psychological disorders, you know, like phobias, where there's arachnophobia, anxiety disorders, that kind of stuff. So I want to be clear that there's an accepted common usage of phobia in psychology, but there is also in science, like hydrophobic
Materials,
molecules,
yeah,
right?
Stuff that repels water,
Right, and also in discrimination. So
yeah,
and here's the thing too: if there's any shame from being called a homophobe, it shouldn't be from any potential association with a psychological disorder, right? Because at least for me, it isn't there.
Yeah,
the shame should be from wanting to discriminate against and limit the freedoms of people who are essentially minding their own business.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that occurred to me after the last email, there's a bit of a logical inconsistency in having a beef about the connotations, the roots of the word homophobia, while using the term SJW as an unironic insult, right? I don't personally have a problem with being called a social justice word because, you know, kind of cool insult. But there's more credibility to complain about homophobia if you don't use a term that's created by bigots who have a vested interest in maintaining and exploiting established power structures and perpetuating social injustices.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that there's a better term for that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one day we'll see the term reclaimed by the people it's meant to insult, the same way other bigoted words are. And I can think of a few racist ones off the top of my head that have done just that, right?
Yeah.
Which we won't mention now because we're not in the kind of place where we can actually say that. But, oh, wow, that's a digression, and we've outlasted the fight. Maybe we should not have used a tantrum totem because the fight ended too quickly. But back to main points. So in one way, fighting for same-sex marriage makes a lot of sense, right? Marriage offers advantages, and if you don't think it does, we can get into that as a separate issue. And people in same-sex relationships look at marriage and say, hey, that's kind of cool. How come we don't have that?
Yeah.
And instead of saying, wow, take it away from them, if we can't have it, nobody should have it, they're saying, we would like the same thing. Which takes me back to the original point of privilege, right? Which is, I think, what the problem was, that a place of privilege is a phrase that's gotten a different kind of sort of negative connotations, right?
It's been used a lot and also disparaged a lot.
Right. In my mind, whether you like the word privilege or not, it describes something that exists, and sometimes it's maybe a bit more obvious.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while. The privilege to marry the person that you are in love with was not something that was extended to homosexuals, right? People like part of the LGBTQ community. And whether or not you like the connotations of the word privilege, that's what it was. People had the privilege to marry, and other people did not have the privilege to marry.
Right.
And that's, at a fundamental level, what privilege is. Even if nobody wanted to, even if there was not a single gay person who actually wanted to get married, they still would not have had that privilege anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe I like to use an analogy, I think, and let's see if this lands or not. So when somebody's born into a family that has a lot of money, having that family money, it doesn't guarantee you success, but it's a head start and it's an advantage, right? And that rich kid, he might piss it away, or maybe they'll be really successful, but no matter what happens to them, not many people are going to argue that they are somehow starting out without an advantage that gives them a better chance of success. It's no guarantees, just a chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the thing. That rich kid, if he's successful, there's a really good chance that he's still going to have to work to get there, right? And work pretty hard to get successful, but it doesn't change the fact that he had a head start.
And there's a host of problems that comes with being born into wealth too that we see explored. The idea of feeling like you need to live up to something in particular, that you need to compare yourself to your parents, that there's different metrics for success and different stresses that lifestyle puts on you. No one's saying that any given person has their life easy just because they're rich. I think very few people would look at what they've done up to any given point in their lives and say, I've had it easy. Although I think I actually can say that I have had it pretty easy, but I think a lot of people balk at saying that they've had things easy, because I think everybody has struggles and issues, and those are separate from.
Oh, absolutely. And then that's exactly
from
the point.
The
I was
kind of
trying to
objective modifier.
Yeah, because it feels like when people say that you have privilege, that it's somehow making it sound like you've been lazy or you haven't had to work.
Yeah, it's like you've had it easy and I've had it hard, and that's why you're doing better than I am. But the problem is that's not actually what.
That's not what it means.
That's not what it means. Nobody's telling anybody that they've not earned what they have.
Right. John Scalzi, a science fiction writer I really like. He's got a great blog. He did an article about comparing having privilege to going through life on a lower difficulty setting. Link is in the description. Highly recommend the article. He's a great writer. His books are really good too. His fiction stuff, science fiction, totally love him. I guess maybe getting back to the original thing too about privilege. See, I'll tell you what, my privilege is being able to walk to my car in a dark parking lot and not worry about keeping my keys in my hand to use as a weapon in case there's some guy ready to jump out and rape me. Whether some guy is there or not and ready to jump out doesn't make a difference, right? My
privilege don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. And my privilege is that when I'm walking down the dark street, a stranger coming the other way doesn't feel like they need to cross the street to avoid me.
Yeah.
Right? Here's another good one. It's I can go for a run and not have to decide to leave my hair loose and be extra hot and sweaty because a ponytail would somehow give an attacker the chance to grab it like a handle.
Yeah.
And getting back to specifically the video is, my privilege is that when some commenter on YouTube wants to insult me, he tells me that I must be really skinny because I like ramen. Ramen.
Yeah.
Instead of threatening to find out where I live and rape me, right?
Yeah, it's a totally different discussion. Or sometimes we even get insulted by being like called groups that we don't belong to. There's literally groups of people that are being used as an insult against us, and that people are saying, "Oh, you're like these people, and that's bad."
Yeah.
Which is awful. If we were actually a part of any of the groups that have been used directly as insults, that would suck. It would be awful. It would be totally unacceptable, and it would be so much worse to.
But it's still bad.
Like make content on the internet.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's what I meant last time when I say that I'm speaking from a position of privilege. It's speaking out means I'm risking losing one viewer instead of risking even more abuse from other people, right? And I just want to point out too, because if you don't see it, YouTube does a better job than other social media like Twitter and Facebook at hiding the abuse. There's a pretty robust algorithm that flags comments to either be held for a review or possibly spam, and no one gets to see those until we release them, right? So you might not see as much abusive behavior towards YouTubers because it gets moderated and can be deleted before you see it. Whereas on Twitter and Facebook, it's more of a free-for-all. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it isn't happening, and I'm just pointing out that I'm aware of that, right?
So yeah, I mean, we've talked like a lot about, I think, a lot of the minutia of your comment, but I think at the end of the day, the reason why we use terms like privilege is because they're useful and they mean something, and you can argue about some of the semantics of it, but the idea of privilege is undeniable. The idea that some people have opportunities that other people wouldn't have otherwise, whether or not that makes their life as a whole easier or harder is a whole other discussion, but the fact that some people are in inherently different situations and have inherently different options given to them is what privilege is, and I think it's really hard to say that just doesn't exist. Right.
Oh, and I want to point out too, Drake Pendragon, we're glad you like what we do, but this other stuff, I mean, it's you've been really polite about it, and you recognize that it's only a small part of it, right? This other stuff that you don't like, it's still part of who I am, and I think of who we are.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it was great. I'm glad actually we had a reasonable conversation over email, and I hope that you've maybe consider a few things that we've said.
Yeah.
So
it was definitely much higher quality discourse than you normally find on the internet.
Absolutely. So we appreciate that when you were commenting that you were coming at us from a place of respect.
Yeah, and that was really cool to see.
Yeah. So we're way past the original video that we plan on putting with it. So what I'll do is add another clip of some unused footage that we've done and let that play out a little bit.
Yeah.
And while we're doing that, I wanted, so we can't comment what's on screen because at this point there's nothing on our screen because the video finished. Thanks again to everyone for watching, and a special thanks to Alberto Jr. Camarillo, who continues to support us at the final word level, Lane at the credited supporter level, and of course, well, not of course, and also Laszlo, who throws a buck our way each month without expecting any recognition, so we don't mention him as often because we don't want Lane to feel ripped off.
But we're still thankful.
We're still thankful, though, which is sort of the point.
So there we go. I think that's it for this week. We'll let this play out. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.